All right, guys, welcome back to the Everything College Football Podcast. Today, I'll be doing my preview and prediction for Week 2 contest between the USF Bulls and the Florida Gators. Going down this Saturday in Ben Hill Griffin Stadium in Gainesville. 54.5 is the total. 17.5 is the spread in favor of Florida. 4:15 p.m. Eastern time on the SEC Network. Getting things started with the USF offense going against that Florida defense. Of course, the Gators had a cakewalk opponent, while USF was busy playing a ranked Boise State team. So the Gators, we weren't really able to gauge much from their defense. Shutout victory, gave up less than 100 yards. Splendid performance, but it was certainly expected and did not gauge much from that one. But for USF, on the other hand, this was a good opportunity to see them out of the gate. Byron Brown returned from, health injuries last year. That was certainly a big problem for him. Now he's fully healthy. Back in 2023, he was a highly productive player. He looked pretty impressive in his return. 67% comp rate, had 210 passing, ran for 43 yards and 2 touchdowns, showcasing his explosiveness, his size, the elusiveness as well. Brown, he's played in plenty of big-time games now. Up until this point, early on in the last season, he was healthy, so he got to play against Bama and Miami before he got hurt pretty much the rest of the season. Back in 2023, he faced somewhat of the same opponent. So Brown, he's no stranger to big-time games. He played quite well in the season opener. The thing for USF is this team, the offense didn't really look like what we're accustomed to seeing. The run game was just not there. From the running backs, Elvon Isaac had a big run, ended up leading the team with 52 yards. Cartavius Norton, the transfer, had 7 carries for 15 and 1 score. Overall, they had 117 rushing yards. Brown and his ability to make plays was a big chunk of that. And you just did not see them really gauge much against the Boise defense. This game was more so, I think, about Boise State struggling than USF really pouring it on because, we can only hold the USF offense for so long, right? Boise State could not manufacture much offense. And that led to eventually USF being able to burn them with a couple of deep balls. There's a silly penalty after a 3-and-out after a big sack. USF ended up scoring a TD on that drive. Later on in the game, they had a fake punt as well that really gave them the momentum and opened that game up. It really was not much about the USF offense that really allowed them to, shine in that game because the run game, again, struggled. The offensive line also had 4 sacks and 7 tackles for loss. This was far from a complete performance from USF, so obviously there's a lot more that they're capable of accomplishing, but here against the Gators, I think it could be tough. I think for USF, they significantly benefited from mistakes by Boise, so we're going to have to see more of that typical rushing attack from USF, and it's been successful. Like last year against Alabama, they had troubles defending it, moving with a lot of tempo. Brown's going to see probably north of 20 touches in this game. His size, especially in short yardage, is such a beneficiary for this offense. Going against the Florida defense, though, that, as the season went on last year, they were great against the run, and they have standouts up front. Guys like Tyreek Sapp, Caleb Banks, he was 2 of the best in the conference. George Gums had a phenomenal week 1, starting to get guys like Cameron James and LJ McCray involved. So it's a defensive line that is very physical and very deep for the Gators. Now, I definitely question how the linebacking core will do this year. It's relatively a young group. Miles Graham, a true sophomore. Aaron Childs, a true sophomore. Grayson Howard, he's more of a veteran of the program, but doesn't have the greatest of experience. I definitely wonder how they might struggle in this game because, this is a complex rushing attack, especially when they get downfield and they start moving with tempo. They're hard to defend, and for the younger backs, or the younger linebackers, that is, it might be a little bit more difficult for them when it comes to communication to make sure everyone's set, and, that could certainly be a problem. So I don't think this will be the easiest of games for Florida. I think the linebacking core are going to learn a lot here, and how they play is certainly going to be valued, in my opinion. Whether it's good or bad, it's something that's going to carry over, especially into LSU 2 weeks later. In the secondary for Florida, Dejon Johnson did end up playing. Cormani McClain at corner. I think Devin Moore is a standout. They're going to be going up against a receiving core that's honestly not the greatest. I mean, they were able to spring some big plays. Keyshawn Singleton, he's phenomenal. The next best receiver was Chaz Nimrod, who I don't really think's all that great, but he did have a big play there against Boise. The receiving group, that was just not as versatile or as deep as we're accustomed to seeing in years past under Alex Golesh. This will be a fun test, though. I think for Florida, again, you just want to see how those linebackers will do, and if they struggle, then USF could certainly have success, but I think this offensive line is probably going to be at a pretty big disadvantage. I think that's going to have them behind the sticks. It's certainly going to allow Florida to feast. Safety Jordan Castell, of course, he's a standout as well. Bryce Thornton, a really good run defender. So the DBs have strong responsibilities as well. The middle of the defense is going to be where my eyes are for the most part of this contest. Now you move to the Florida offense, going up against the Bulls defense. For the Gators, again, playing a weak opponent, they were able to put up 52 points. Lagway played less than 40 snaps, and he was pretty sharp. It was really the youth movement at receiver for them. You had Vernell Brown make a phenomenal catch. TJ Abrams, a fellow freshman. Nashawn Montgomery. These guys were the leading pass catchers. It wasn't really your top guys like Eugene Wilson. He's expected to be phenomenal this year out of the slot. J. Michael Sturvant as your top X. He only had 2 catches. So the veterans really weren't involved a whole lot. You had 15 different guys catch passes. Obviously, reps were really split in this one. A lot of the younger guys getting the go. I mean, backup quarterback Tramel Jones ended up playing more reps than Lagway did. So this was really about the starters just getting their feet wet a little bit. Didn't play a whole lot. And I think, of course, you're going to see a complete leash and a complete offense operated out of against USF as we're now going to start playing some tough opponents. Lagway, though, 120, completed 83% with 3 scores. I think when you look at those receivers, it's going to be Wilson, Sturdivant, Vernell Brown. That's going to be your top 3. They're going to be getting all the looks. Florida last year starting to showcase some balance. Jaden Baugh really emerged despite being a bigger back, has some pretty impressive speed. He had, as a 231-pounder, 11 yards per attempt in the season opener. The run game for Florida behind a phenomenal offensive line is something I think is really going to uptick this year. I think DJ Lagway, when it comes to having clean pockets as well, something that's going to be very frequent. Bryce Lovett was really the only guy that struggled in the opener over at right tackle. He's still a young guy. He's got a lot of upside, a lot of potential, but he was pretty poor against LIU. You have Austin Barber and Jake Slaughter. Those are 2 of the best in the country at left tackle and center, respectively. I think Florida has one of the best offensive lines collectively in FBS, and they're going to be going up against the USF defensive line. It's a little bit weaker. This is not the strongest of group, especially when it comes to defending the run. Josh Salazar is a phenomenal transfer from a fellow Florida rival team that he came in, and he was able to make a pretty good impact in week 1 against Boise. The Broncos just were not really able to manufacture much on the ground. The one drive they did have that was good ended up stalling out with a fumble, so USF was able to come up with some opportune turnovers. Overall, though, the guys were inconsistent when it comes to tackling from the defensive line. Nobody was really able to be all that efficient. Collectively, the team had 19 missed tackles, and that's kind of what I allude to. It was a blowout victory, but if you watch the game, it just did not feel like the cleanest of performances from the Bulls, and I don't think that it's really going to, phase them well against the Gators. They do have 2 outstanding linebackers, though. We talked about these guys in the offseason. Mac Harris, Jalen Schuler, they were phenomenal in that game. Harris was dominant in coverage, great against the run. Schuler had 14 tackles, 1 TFL. I mean, you have 2 outstanding guys here in the middle. Definitely going to be setting the tone here against Florida. In the secondary, Deshaun Rucker's a standout corner. He really struggled against the run, though. Had some missed tackles as well. You have another guy I really like, though, in Taven Ward at safety. He can play in the box a lot. So for USF, they do have a couple alphas. I do think they have some really good players on this defense collectively, and they did have a nice game all together to open up the year. Michael Williams, the defensive end, is another really good run stopper as well. So it was an impressive performance, but I don't think it told the full story. I mean, they were very inconsistent when it comes to the tackling. Boise's quarterback, Maddox Madsen, he was not very accurate, was not very poised and polished. It's not going to be the same script against Florida. You're going to be playing against a significantly better quarterback, one that's going to have a lot more pass protection, a lot more of a run game, more playmaking at pass catcher as well. So this is going to be a significantly different challenge. It's a confidence booster altogether for the Bulls. They played good. I'll give it to them. But overall, it was not the cleanest of performance on really either side of the ball. That leads me to the final thoughts and the prediction. I think a lot of people are probably going to think that USF is going to be, a nice dog here on the road, about an 18-point line. And that certainly is possible, especially if how they played against Alabama over the last 2 years. But they played Miami with the same type of momentum. They got blown